Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show today. Today is Sunday, the 1st of March, 2020, and thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate having you here. Now, here's what I got to say. Over the last few days, I've been thinking about this situation kind of the same as you guys. It's kind of taken me a bit by surprise. It basically came out of nowhere, you know. Uh, well, it didn't come out of nowhere, but it, it comes so fast. And trying to figure out just exactly how this is going to play out in the economy, but not just in the economy, but how this is going to, the ramifications and how this is going to play out on the average citizen in the United States and here in Canada, everywhere in the world, uh, is a little bit difficult to say the least. This is really a very strange black swan event that's come out of nowhere. It's come out of left field, basically, but it's going to have a profound impact. The impact is going to be for the last 4 or 5 days, I've been like mulling it over in the back of my mind, thinking, how is this going to play out? Well, one of the things is we have that one of the things it's associated with is a profound deflation. Needless to say, when people go home and they shut their door behind them and they don't want to come out of their house, they're not spending money. The consumer base not spending money. Now, in the United States, we have a tremendously powerful consumer base. We've got 42 million Americans who are over the age of 65 and are on Medicare. And just that alone, just thinking about the Medicare bill, it's just absolutely off the charts, because that particular demographic, the age 65 and older, is basically what this whole disease picks on, that age demographic. Hits it the hardest, and medical costs is one of the things that has to play into this. This is going to be ridiculous. And the situation, too, that it generates the off-spins, like when countries' supply chains and distribution gets basically cut, like China's supply chain distribution gets cut, they produce necessary parts for almost everything that runs our world. Okay, so say you've got a company out there, and say they're a shipping company, and they're in the trucking business, and they say it's food production that they're shipping. They box up food, and they put it on their trucks, and they ship it out to the grocery stores. And say they're a moderate-sized company, like they got a big warehouse. They're not not a real big company, but they're like a more moderate-sized company. This is a company I'm making up right now as I go along. But say they're a moderate-sized company. Say they have like 12 employees, and they have a forklift, and they have a big building big warehouse building where they food distribution. Say they're part of the food distribution chain for the United States. Just one of many companies. But what we're going to do is we're going to take our magnifying glass and we're going to come down, just like you're coming down on Google Maps, and take a look at this particular company in general, this fake company that I'm making up right now. Okay, so say they got like 12 employees, they got a forklift, they got a nice big warehouse, and they got trucks that come in maybe 4 or 5 times a day to load up, and they load up the trucks that go out on that particular, and that's their job, Well, all of a sudden, half of the employees are calling in sick to this fake company I just made up. Half of the employees are calling in sick. They're not going to go into work today. And the skeleton staff they have on thing is being pushed hard to try to fill the trucks. Like they're working as fast as they can. So while they're working, they're using their forklift, all of a sudden some sort of a hydraulic hose or something breaks on the forklift. So they run in and they call up the parts store where they normally get parts, and the guy says, well, that part's made in China. Well, the guy says, well, what are we going to have to load the trucks by hand? We can't use a forklift today? And we're on a skeleton crew already of only 6 men, you know? And the guy says, well, I don't know what to tell you. That part's made in China, and we've got a back order on that part, that part, but we have to wait 6 weeks at least, and then we still don't know if we're going to be able to get the part. And the guy's like, how am I going to get my forklift running? These kind of logistical problems, and then that company in particular, normally they say they load 6 trucks in an afternoon. Now they find themselves working hard to try to load 1 truck. All the men are shoving boxes by hand. 3 or 4 guys trying to lift the box, and it's because the forklift's broke. They're doing their best, but they put out 6 trucks in a day on the road, say, heading to Food Lion or Target or whatever stores, Walmart or whatever, and now they only load 1 truck. So you got one. Well, people, are out there requiring that food to eat. So each time you get a breakdown in the supply chains, you're going to get a more of a, and this is the basics, nitty gritty of the supply chains. As you get breakdowns in these supply chains, what you're going to get is shortage of supply. So your food stores and all your stores in general might have a shortage of supply, and it might be very serious as more and more people fall ill, So on one side, you got a shortage of supply. Generally, that means prices are going to rise because of shortage of supply. But on the other side of this coin, all the consumers, they're homesick. So they're not buying anything, or not buying very little. But food, they're going to be still having to feed themselves. So they're still going to be buying food. And food is going to be in shortage supplies too. So the way I see it, food prices are going to climb. Really going to climb. That's one thing that's going to climb. But what about all these other consumer goods that aren't food? Are the prices going to rise on them? Because there's going to be two things coming into play here at the same time. One is shortage of supply, which generally raises prices. But on the other side of this coin is you've got a lack of demand, which generally lowers prices, So you got these two forces coming together at the same time on goods that are not food-related goods, So we're probably going to see a massive spike in food prices, and at the same time, shortage of supply of the particular foods you might be looking for. So some of these food chains won't be affected as much as others. Some food chains will be very profoundly affected. In other words, you'll go in to buy your favorite spaghetti sauce, and there'll be none on the aisle. Where other food chains might continue to run, so there might be spaghetti sauce available, but it won't be the brand that you particularly want. It'll be some other brand, not the brand you normally buy, but the price will be, you'll find it double or triple or maybe 4 times what it was, So instead of buying that can of spaghetti sauce for $1.89, the brand you normally buy, the bottle of spaghetti sauce, you might have to buy the alternative brand, and normally that brand might be $2.29. Now you'll find the prices went up to $8.99 for exactly the same thing. This is what I'm thinking will probably happen with food. And also, you're going to find that an awful lot of the aisles are empty of food, At the same time, there's less shoppers. So, much less shoppers. In other words, the stores will be practically empty. This is a very strange situation that we're going into, and I'm trying to configure it in my mind. You see, this is the way my mind, the little hamster spinning on the wheel right now, wondering how this is going to affect you guys. It's going to affect you in a very adverse way because, first off, don't get sick. I know that's hard to say, but let's take a look now at the hospital system across the United States. How's it going to affect that? It's going to affect it in an extremely adverse way, because the hospital system gets flooded, and what about all these other people who need care for other situations that do not involve this at all? Totally different medical situations that can arise, if the hospital system's flooded. How much capacity does the United States hospital system, and Canada here too, and all of the countries that this is going to impact, how many beds do they have? Getting down to the nitty-gritty of it, and how much of the percentage of the population can they actually handle if the percentage of the population actually gets sick? Well, in the United States, you got, 330 million people, roughly. I think that's the number, if I remember correctly. 330 million people, and so 1% of those people would be 3.3 million people. So if we're looking at 1% of the population would be, if they were to get sick suddenly, that would be 3.3 million people. And I don't think there's anywhere near that would be 3 million people getting sick simultaneously. I don't think there's anywhere near 3 million beds available in the hospital system. I don't think there's anywhere near that number. So basically, I don't think that they can handle more than a few 100,000 people getting simultaneously sick. If all of a sudden this morning, right now, we got some sort of a weird thing where everybody got some sort of a stomach ache, and say 100,000 people in America suddenly got a stomach ache today, I think it would almost flood the hospital system. Not to mention if you had millions suddenly people falling ill, I mean, it's just, you just see big long lineups. And what good does a lineup really do you if you're ill, Especially if it is some sort of a contagion and you're standing in that lineup, most likely all the other people have the same kind of contagion. And if somebody comes to the lineup, and he doesn't have that contagion, he's got some other medical problem, then he's probably going to catch the contagion off the other people in the lineup. A lot of them are going to be coughing and stuff like that. These are things we need to consider. These are things we need to think of. And, I mean, this whole thing extends out further and further into the mechanics of it. And how long is it all going to last? This kind of situation with food distribution being slowed down to a certain degree because an awful lot of the truckers say, let's take a look at the age of the people who drive the trucks, for instance. Because that food doesn't get into it's not the tooth fairy that brings the food to the grocery store, it's the truckers. And, if you took a look at the demographic of truckers in general, there are some women truckers out there, women who drive trucks, but they don't represent the largest demographic of the actual trucking industry. The actual trucking industry, most of them are men between the ages of 30 and 60. That's the largest demographic of the trucking industry, men between the ages of 30 and 60. And those are the ones who get struck the hardest with this illness. Whew, guys, honest to goodness. So what we could be looking at is a potential of maybe a 50% slowdown in trucking. In other words, trucks not arriving on time, trucks delayed because the driver is sick, extends out further and further and further, so this is what's going to put pressures on inventories in a lot of these situations, especially when it comes to food, because you're going to have massive amounts of people coming in at the last minute and wanting to stock up on food supplies. We're already starting to see that happen, at the same time on the other end, on the supply end, you've got truckers falling ill, you've got trucks sitting in warehouses not being driven because part of the and a lot of this depends on just how fast this thing moves through. But in the preliminary stages here, it looks like this thing is moving extremely fast, and you have to realize that they're trying to stop it and slow it down as much as they can, but still it's moving fast. What happens at a certain point when it's just too many people to track or trace, too many people to test, and they just basically have to throw their hands up in the air and say, well, this thing is just too big for us to handle, because it's got to a point where we can't test everybody. There's not enough test kits to test millions and millions of people, and I mean, it's just not logistically plausible to even try, and it's just gonna do what it's gonna do, and they throw their hands up in the air. Because I've used an illustration for this. Say you had a woman that was going to take a guy left his dog with her and he says, okay, keep my dog for the weekend. It's a Great Dane. It weighs 189 pounds, and here's the chain and here's the lead, and she hands her the chain, to take him for a walk. The guy says, tomorrow he needs his walk, and so she says, okay, I'll take care of your dog for whatever. And so the next day she goes to take the dog for a walk, and all of a sudden the dog starts to try to run. The dog starts running. Well, she's running behind. She's pulling for all she can to try to stop the dog, but the dog ain't stopping. He's still moving. Even with her pulling all, she yells at the dog, and the dog won't stop. The dog keeps going, but she keeps hanging on. Well, she's slowing the dog down, because if she let go of the chain, the dog would go into a full gallop. So to say the dog's going along at walking speed, and she's pulling along for everything she can, trying to slow the dog down. Ultimately, in the end, she starts to get out of breath. Then later, she gets completely breathless. What's going to happen in the end is she's going to drop the chain, let the dog go. That's what's going to happen, Well, I see that as what could happen, I mean, it's just, in the end, it just becomes too much. It just goes, it's got more energy than you got, and this is the thing. And so at a certain point, when this thing starts to expand outwards, what kind of situations is it going to generate for us, the impact? What's it going to be? Well, I see shortages on a lot of things we normally take for granted, but I see the system staying up and trying to continue to keep supplying these things on the other end, but I see prices going exorbitantly high. Now, what about in the part of the financial system that the Fed controls? What about the higher end of the financial system, the higher end of the feeding pool, Wall Street economy? Well, the Fed is, what's happened is we've taken the awful beating in the stock market this week, And believe me, the Fed has taken notice of this. In fact, they're probably shivering in their boots right now at the impact it's having on the economy in general. I think you're going to see accommodative monetary policy, and I think it's going to be the biggest accommodative monetary policy you've ever seen. Gold prices have been suffering. Silver prices have been suffering. Cryptocurrency prices have been suffering as a result of this deflationary action on the markets. $6 trillion have been lost in the economy over this past 10 days or so, around that period of time. $6 trillion have been lost. Just basically vanished, disappeared. So the Fed has to try to make up for all of this. Well, they can't make up for $6 trillion, or can they? Well, we're going to have to wait and see. People would say, well, that's more than they've got on their entire balance sheet right now. $6 trillion, just to bring everything back up to normal again. So this is the effect of this deflation that's coming upon us. And remember, the Great Depression that started in 1929 didn't involve any sort of a contagion. It was all caused by deflation. And look at the impact it had on society in general. So now we've got a great deflation occurring. over $6 trillion being lost in a matter of days, and no sign of this abating. And look at the problem that that can cause alone if you only study the Great Depression, you know? But to compound that, to add fuel to it, we have this enormous situation evolving day by day, hour by hour, with this virus. So, Gerald Celente likes to say this is the greatest crash ever, the greatest depression ever is coming, and he said it was coming in about a year from now, you know. But now he's updated it. He said this thing is pushing us into it right away. I mean, basically, this whole situation with this exploding. I'm going to call it exploding because it's growing so fast. It's growing exponentially day by day. Is pushing us into this ahead of time. It was coming. It was coming. Like Gerald Celente says, it was coming in 2021 more than likely. But we're going into it now, and it looks like a desperate hole, like a giant pit with no bottom, you know. So, you know, we got a lot of stuff happening. I'm going to try to stay on top of it for you guys day by day as this situation unfolds. But there's a lot to watch because it's all happening so fast. This come out of left field. And I mean, it's when you start to think about the implications all the way down on a personal level for each and every one of you out in my audience. Scary times we live in. It's a little bit too much to actually configure it in your mind exactly how it's going to all play out. But we're going to find out very soon because this is all playing out in real time, day by day. Listen, give me a thumbs up. Thank you guys for listening. Have a market report for you guys on Monday, right through the week. Have a great day. Bye-bye, guys.